Perdido Street Station is a year 2000 novel by the British author China Miéville. It's difficult to categorise because it straddles so many genres, but the science fiction magazine Interzone made a good start when it called it a fantasy equivalent of cyberpunk. It's a huge book, nearly 900 pages in my paperback version, and at that length I think it's only fair to warn the reader that it has rather a bleak ending. More of that later. Miéville was born in Norfolk in 1972 and grew up in London. He studied social anthropology at Cambridge, then gained an MA and a PhD at the London School of Economics. He published his first novel, King Rat, in 1998. Since then, his fiction has won numerous prizes. Perdido Street Station won the Arthur C. Clarke Award. Miéville's a committed Marxist, although with the possible exception of his 2004 novel, Iron Council, his politics isn't overt in his novels. Perdido Street Station's world, Lag, about which he's written two other novels, is at least as significant as its characters. The titular location is at the centre of a vast city called New Crobazon, and is a huge elevated rail intersection, which also contains, we're told in Chapter 6, a tower for the city militia, plus shops and torture chambers and workshops and offices and empty spaces. In some ways, it's the city in microcosm. New Crobazon is a sprawling megalopolis where magic and science are indistinguishable, and where various species of vaguely humanoid creature, including humans themselves, who are the privileged species, live alongside each other in a kind of grudging acceptance. It's not exactly a dystopia. In many ways, it's rather like London must have felt in Elizabethan times. Even the militia isn't hyper-intrusive. It operates on a principle of policing by decentralized fear, as Miéville tells us in Chapter 23. The protagonist is a fat and thick-set human scientist by the name of Isaac Dande Grimnabulin, who's in love with a female member of the Kefri, an insectile species with chitinous heads, compound eyes, and head legs, with whom he has regular sex, which Miéville describes in some detail. I mention that not for prurient reasons, but simply to underline how original this book is. The reader never feels that anything particularly grotesque is happening. Grimnabulin is hired to restore the power of flight to a member of a bird-like species whose wings were sawn off as a punishment for an obscure offence. By way of research, he accumulates a huge collection of flying things, some in larval form. One of the larvae hatches into something of terrifying power, and for reasons explained in the novel, it's not the only member of its species. Known as slate moths, together they threaten to destroy the city and everyone in it. At its heart, Perdido Street Station is an action and adventure story set in a weird world. What makes it so impressive is above all the sheer force of Miéville's imagination. Just as you think you've learned everything there is to know about New Crobazon, the author adds something radically new. And that's helped by the quality of his writing and the detail of his descriptions. By the end, the reader may well have the sense of knowing New Crobazon as intimately as any real city. And it's incredibly pacey. There aren't many novels, even great ones, of which one can honestly say that 900 pages doesn't feel excessive. And although some of the characters, for all their species uniqueness, do feel a little like stock types, Miéville has managed to create at least one genuinely original character in the Weaver. Again, how many novels have that? As I said at the beginning, the ending's very bleak. For most of the novel, Isaac and his companions have enjoyed enough improbable breaks and minor victories to make even Indiana Jones envious. It does feel as if the author's very much on their side, which is why it feels a little as if the author's abandoned them at the end. Which isn't to say that the ending isn't satisfying in the sense of tying up the various loose ends, and of course any writer's entitled to conclude a story as he or she feels fit. But sometimes bleakness can be a substitute for analytical depth, especially in a novel whose reality is so very different to ours, and where reflection on the meaning of life on 21st century planet Earth may appear misplaced. Miéville's on record as saying that he'd like to try his hand at a novel in every genre. It would be interesting to see whether that includes undiluted realism. The problem is that he's so good at doing what he already does that he might find it difficult to tear himself away, and I shouldn't think his agent and his publisher will approve. But that's another matter entirely. The end.